Hey, Bright Lights, it's Angela. Welcome back to a very special episode of Architecting. Today, we are celebrating International Women's Day. And this year's theme is all about achieving equity. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring in an architect and small business owner to talk about those issues and her own career experience. So, today I have with me Sarah Kleiner. Sarah is a founding partner at Envisage Architects. I know her from AIE Cincinnati. We've gotten a chance to work together. She helped to reboot the Women in Architecture Committee and also was a person who raised her hand to represent Ohio in the small business exchange, small firm exchange that AIA was putting together at the time. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Angela.
So I always like to get started with having people tell a little bit of their origin story because it's easy to look at someone where they are today and not appreciate those moments of truth they encountered along the way. And why they made the decisions they made that led them here. So tell us a little bit more about what made you want to be an architect and how your career path has gone.
Oh, that could be a long story, Angela. What made me want to be an architect? Well, my dad was an engineer and I did well in math and I enjoy solving problems. And so for a very long time, I thought I was going to be an engineer. And it wasn't until I had to take an art class in high school that I realized how much I loved it. And I came home one day and I told my parents I wanted to be an art teacher. And then we had a family meeting and talked about all the ways that we can incorporate art and math together. And there were a lot of suggestions that didn't sit well. And my dad said architecture, and I said, that's it. So it was really out of the blue when I was, I guess, maybe a sophomore, maybe even a junior in high school. Um, and then it was just like, okay, I've decided that's it. So probably not that out of the blue when you look back at my parents were interested in architecture. We went on tours of houses and things like that. But then I ended up at the University of Cincinnati to get my Bachelor of Architecture and graduated in 1996. Um, I worked for a very large A&E firm. I had several co-op opportunities. So I had worked for 5 or 6 different firms while I was in school, which was great. I got a wide variety of experience. The last firm that I worked for, I got a job there and it did not go well. I mean, it was just like one thing after another. A large firm, they don't really care about the person, or the individual's goals. And there weren't other women around. It was the 90s. There weren't a lot of women anyway, but in architecture particularly. And I just saw I was overlooked and not listened to. And a friend of mine wanted to go into business together. So we did that for a few years. I had gotten the experience that I needed to take my exams and passed my tests. I had to take a couple of them a couple times, but that's okay. I was 6 months pregnant when I passed my final ARE exam. Um, the relationship with my original business partner ended when I was pregnant, and then a couple months after I've gotten my license, I find myself trying to make the decision, what do I do? Do I put my child in daycare right away and go and try and find a job, which seemed pretty unlikely anyway? Um, or do I just give up architecture? So I mean, I really cried on and off for a couple of days trying to make this decision because I just didn't see a path other than working full time for a firm, um, or being a stay-at-home mom. So I was a stay-at-home mom, but I had connections and I kept working. And there was a group in town called the Boyer Guild of Women in Architecture. That it's just a local group of women, and I joined that, and I got to meet some other women, and I started working on my own. Um, so I did that for 12 years and didn't realize what kind of experience I was gaining, um, learning how to get my own clients and run a business and do contracts and insurance and all the things. But I had also worked for other firms on and off helping out during that time and ended up at a large firm where I met my business partners. And I worked there for 3 years and reminded myself why I didn't like working for large firms. And I got a call from someone who didn't know I had gone corporate and said, "Hey, I've got a small job. It's too small for our firm. Do you want it?" And I jumped up and I asked my friend, now business partner, if she wanted to do it with me, and she said yes. And they asked us to do a second job together, and then we decided to start our own firm. So that's kind of the condensed version of where I am today. That was 9 years ago. So we started it 9 years ago in March. Yep.
Well, congratulations. I mean, it's a great firm, and I've seen you guys really grow it and build a successful and solid foundation for it. I love that our origin stories have some similar things in them. So I told my parents I wanted to be an art major, and it was my mother who I think was very concerned about how I would earn a living and support myself, who connected the dots with things I was already doing, right? Like I would draw floor plans, anything I could build with, I was building with. I loved Legos, but it never occurred to me to be an architect. And she arranged for me to do a tour of a local firm, and that was what helped me make the decision. So very similar to you, like thought I was going to go the art path, and then I was like, oh, this is like art and so
Right.
that's a great story. But I also think that you had an opportunity to get a lot of clarity through the different experiences you had about what you liked and what you didn't like. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand. Just because it didn't feel good at a particular firm doesn't mean that you're not cut out to do this. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about how you develop that clarity around what's the right fit for me.
Right. So as I said, I had worked for several jobs. I don't know who all is going to be listening in, but through the University of Cincinnati, there's internships while you go to school. And small firms were really a better fit for me in general. And I think, it's always 2020 hindsight, but in a small firm, the people, you matter, they matter, they want what's best for you. And in a large firm, even when I worked at Disney, I really enjoyed that experience, but there was still all of this stuff kind of happening around me, about me sometimes, but I had no knowledge of or control over. And that didn't feel good, right? Like someone coming in and saying, well,
Mhm.
so and so said this about you today, or said that you feel this way today. And it's like, I don't feel that way. Like, what, and what do you do about that? I had some very obvious negative experiences that I didn't know how to handle. I had someone yell at me very loudly in his office because I was distracting the men in the office, um, which I wasn't. I was quietly doing my work, and I don't know if he had had a bad day, but a couple guys came over and talked to me that day, and then all of a sudden this anger and frustration came out at me. And at a time when no one followed up on that, everyone heard what happened, but no one was alerted. HR didn't. So I guess for me, working had to be more than just a job and more than just a paycheck. It has to be about relationships. And not just relationships with the people that you work with, but also relationships with your project and with your clients. Um, Again, working in a very large, very fast-paced environment, the work was interesting, but it was always do it better, faster. Like it was never enough. Whatever you did, keep doing more, 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 more. Just push, push, push. And um, and again, in that large environment, there's all these people making these decisions that really don't know what you do on a day-to-day basis or why you do it. And I find that very frustrating.
Yeah, and I think that also, finding that you like that more, I feel close to everyone, it's more nurturing, people know one another well. That's an important thing to realize about what your personal needs are. And I think also in a small firm, a lot of times they can be more flexible, and that can be a nice thing for
Yes.
people as well.
Well, and I was able to work for a couple different firms part-time, which was pretty unheard of at the time that I was doing it. But things were really busy. People were in need, and I wasn't willing to work full time. So I was able to find some jobs. And I felt like I was able to give as much, if not more, than the other employees. Because when I was there, I was really there. And I was excited to be there, and I wasn't burnt out. I mean, I was 100 miles an hour at home and 100 with my kids and 100 miles an hour at work, but at least the change up of the environment was a lot more stimulating and interesting. And I remember someone telling me, like, oh, it is hard when you're not here and I have questions. And I'm like, but if I was here, I'd be running twice as many jobs and I still might not be here to answer your questions. But because I'm home with my kids, you're judging me. And that's why we have a very flexible work environment at our firm. It's just because of that. Like Wendy had the same thing where she had a couple of years off, but then it's like, why do we have to feel guilty to be taking care of our children? You know, It- if a guy goes and takes care of his children, like he's lauded for, oh, what a great dad he is. But when a woman does it, you don't want to tell anybody or let anybody know that you have to leave 15 minutes early to make it to the soccer game, or maybe not even early. You're just not staying late enough, you know? And so I think there's a lot of pressure
Yeah, and
in
I
this
think
field.
there's a lot of false choices, and you mentioned it, like,
Yeah.
can I really be a good mom and work? And what does that look like? And how do I do it? And I think the answer ends up being that it's your decision and you have to customize what that looks like based on a lot of different things, including what resources you have to help you and what kind of career path you're on, what kind of things you're interested in doing. So there's a lot of things that go into it, and it's not a one size fits all decision at all.
Right. And I found I was a lot happier when I worked. I was a lot happier. When I was not working, I was so incredibly busy and so incredibly bored, I've been trained to be a problem solver and a thinker and a designer. And so, picking up supplies for the party is fine, but only doing things like that, the mundane everyday life activities, it it really dulls the senses. And it's like there's someone inside scratching to get out.
Well, I really do feel most people who are in the field of architecture, it's a vocation, not a job. It's so hard to get through school. And you work so hard to get your license that you wouldn't do this if you didn't truly love it and get a lot of fulfillment out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which was why it was so hard when I thought I was giving it up. I was
Yeah,
like, what? I
absolutely.
just did all this for what? But then it all worked out. I just didn't know. You don't know how it's all going to work out eventually. But
For sure. And I really think that you were courageous at a time when it was an all or nothing proposition to say, no, I think that there's a third choice here.
And I credit that to mentoring, and I didn't realize I was being mentored at the time. But that was the Boyer Guild of Women in Architecture. There was a woman who worked full time for a large firm who's now retired. I mean, this was a very long time ago that she started this. And Boyer is named after India Boyer, who was the first licensed woman in Ohio, licensed female architect. And those women have found alternative ways to be architects. There were women who worked full time, there were women who were stay-at-home moms, and there were women who were working part-time or on their own. And so it was like, oh, I do have a choice or some choice, Maybe I don't know how to get there yet, but then one woman had a baby and she needed help. So she brought me in and showed me how to do structural calculations on some stuff. And then I was like, well, this isn't intimidating. I can do that, you know? So I think mentoring is really important in order to just have that ability to see that there are options and feel like there's support. Like if you know that something's been done before, it's a lot easier to do it. And that doesn't matter if you're lifting weights or running track or being an architect. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a saying, we reach for the highest branch we can see. You know, when someone does something, then we're like, oh, now I see how you get there. It doesn't feel impossible. So those role models and those mentors are really important.
Yeah.
Now, you helped to reboot the Women in Architecture Committee here at AIA Cincinnati. Talk a little bit about why you were willing to take that on and what you were hoping to create in terms of community on that committee.
So I was hoping to get the kind of community that I'd had with the Boyer Guild. Like, we all just got busy, but we still all have those relationships that we had from back then. So it's not this organized group of women as it was. But um, so I guess a couple things. So I joined the AIA when it was really difficult to be a female in the AIA. I got my license and I wanted to be a member of the AIA because I wanted them to know I was there. There weren't very many of us at the time. And back then, you would go to a meeting and it was a formal sit down dinner. It was very expensive and it was all men, mostly older men, and it was very uninviting. I don't know that the men that were there knew what to do with me. I don't know if they thought I was a secretary. I was too intimidated to be shaking people's hands and introducing myself. And it was just this really awful, like, why did I go there? It was icky and I didn't want to be involved. Um, but I wanted the AIA to know I was there. Here I am. I'm going to pay my money every stinking month or year, whatever it was at the time. And
Take that.
stop ignoring me. So I think there are not as many women in AIA, right? We just hit 25%, I think, this last year. And Julie, she just asked us, Wendy and I, if we'd be interested in doing that. So knowing what I had been through, I thought like this is important. Women aren't going to show up at the AIA if they don't feel comfortable, if they don't feel welcome, just like I didn't. And I knew a lot of women and other people too that don't feel comfortable or didn't feel comfortable with the AIA and never joined and never got involved. But you also can't change anything if you don't get involved. So it's this sort of double-edged sword. I don't want to be there and I don't want to put my time into something I'm not enjoying, but I'm not going to want to be there and I'm not going to want to enjoy it if I don't put the time in. So we started that right before the pandemic shut down. That's okay. We got online and we did it that way. And it is hopeful, I think. Hopefully, other people think so too.
Well, I have always enjoyed the Friendsgiving celebrations that you've done and the dinner circles. So we were talking earlier, and you mentioned that what people really are looking for when they join the committee isn't events. It really is just the networking.
Yeah, I feel in today's world, especially, you can get your HSW credits. You can find information on whatever it is you specifically need to know. So things have changed a lot. But there are still women that are the only women in their firm, or maybe they're just 1/10 or 1/20th of the firm even, but that doesn't mean that they're friends with every other woman that's in that firm or the other woman that's in that firm, right? And that doesn't mean they're going through the same things or need the same kind of advice they have to offer. I mean, you need to know more than just one other person, I guess is what I'm saying. So I think those are why people show up is they just want to be able to talk about what it's like to be a woman in architecture. And I think sometimes that's about kids. Sometimes it's just like, hey, this happened at work today, and that didn't feel right. Can you kind of double check me on this? Or what should I do about that? How should I handle this situation? Or, maybe it's just having the network to say, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to try something new. I want to try working in schools, or I want to try development. Who do you know? So it's really important. And I think networking for the men comes easier because that's just what they've always done. An older man sees a younger man, and especially white men, right? Especially in our field. And they're just like, oh, yeah, I remember what it was like to be that guy. Hey, let's go out to lunch. Let's go play a round of golf. Um, and it just isn't there for women.
Yeah, I love how you look to make the opportunities and how, you also believe in a more nurturing, more collaborative kind of model. A lot of women, when we were starting out in our career, they had traded everything to get ahead in an architecture firm. Many of them were not married, didn't have kids, and I think that understanding that success doesn't have to look like sacrificing everything and having no personal life or no quality of life is an important message because, we wonder, why do women leave the profession? Well, if that's our role model, not too many people really want that. And so we think that's success. I don't want success if that's what it looks like. That's too high a cost.
Absolutely. And I also think at the time, if you wanted to be the woman in the room, you were the woman in the room. So there wasn't really room to bring other women up, or there wasn't the feeling of that allowance. So some women, once they got there, were closing doors for other women, right? Because they didn't want the competition. Um, but I'm just under that enough. I think you and I are both just under that enough to be like, wait a minute, yeah, like this doesn't have to be the way. And we can raise everybody up. So if we all work together, we can all start to make this change, and then people can see there is a different way to do it.
Yeah, and letting go of the need to prove yourself, which I think has been a big shadow over a lot of women's careers, is proving that you're good enough. And when you can let that go, you can let go of the micromanaging and you can say, thank God I have someone I can delegate to. Or I
Right.
love that I have a team and they go to work on the stuff I don't want to. And they like that part of the project. And it's awful to have to do everything and try to prove yourself as good at it all when you don't have to work that way.
Absolutely. And I think architecture in general reinforces that idea that you're supposed to be good at everything. When you were going through school, you were supposed to be able to do the structural design and the details and come up with like some amazing design. And that's not the way the real world works. It turns out I didn't even know this about myself. It took a long time to figure out I don't like detailing. I love a good detail. I just don't want to draw it. I want to talk about it. I want to look at it. I want to give a big thumbs up, but I don't want to have to be the one that actually draws it. But there are people in my firm who love to draw. Like, so thank you. Great.
Don't let
Wonderful.
them, right?
Yes. And one of the things that we embrace too is not having to be everything to everybody, not having to prove yourself to every client. And once you got rid of that, then you're like, I don't need to take this on. My gosh, how exhausting it is to try and prove yourself to everyone that you can be everything. You know, if a client doesn't see my value, or a potential client doesn't see my value, goodbye. It's over. I don't want to talk. Like I don't have to climb that hill anymore. And if that means I don't make as much money this month or this year, I'm okay with that. Like I can, that's the other thing about having your own business. You can say, my whole life is more important to me than this one little thing. Like having that balance, having that control, and not having to be in these negative situations, you know? And it's not like every firm is like that. I'm sure the bigger the firm, the more support you can have too, and the more teamwork that you can have. So it's not just being in a small firm, but sometimes in a bigger firm, you don't have a choice over your clients either. So, like,
Very true. Very true. So I think a lot of what you've been saying about women in the profession has a really nice parallel with the next thing that you've managed to get involved in, which is the small firm exchange. And I think many women do find it attractive to go out on their own. So, what made you want to volunteer for this opportunity, and how do you see the small firm exchange helping to give women more opportunities?
yeah, it is all a parallel, right? I mean, the AIA, so gosh darn it, I'm here, started recognizing women, and now we have the women's conference every year, and that's wonderful. And you and I have been, and I find that very um, embracing to go to those. And yet, at a small firm, and we talked about this earlier. I can't quote numbers, but I think something about 70% of firms are small firms. And that's a much smaller percentage of population, but it's a huge percentage of the AIA. But I think that we're all so busy trying to do everything. A lot of small firms are single people, that we don't have the impact that larger firms have on the AIA. So when there was an opportunity to say, here's a way to communicate with the AIA national, but also to find a niche that matters to me, that played into everything else that I've been saying. So it's been a really good, and again, I feel like it's more about networking. When you came on, that was lovely. I think that was our highest attended ever. So thank you very much. Um, but I think too, like, we have people who are university professors, we have people who are, work on their own and just want to talk to another person. Again, be able to throw out ideas and say, what do you think about this? So it's been a little bit more of a networking. We have people that aren't even in the profession directly. We have an interior designer that shows up regularly. So there's something about, finding community, I guess, is sort of the theme. Community and support.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, we need it. There's a lot of economic uncertainty, a lot of change going on, and the way you get through it is by working together, not fighting against one another.
I agree with you. Absolutely. We've been, we started out, we very much bootstrapped our company. So I had my contacts from when I worked on my own, but we did not take a big client. We did not have a big chunk of work. And so we have worked our way up to bigger projects, and that's going well, and partnerships. And now we're starting to pull these relationships that we have with women and with smaller firms, not some are white guys, um, but creating that community that can pull together a really nice package to respond to an RFP and get a bigger project so that we are using each other's skill sets. Um, so that's really nice too. And it is a difficult environment right now. DEI has been eliminated mostly, I guess, from the federal government. We just spent the last year getting all of our initials. For those of you who don't know, if you're a women-owned business federally, you have to get a different state designation. You have to get a different city designation. There's a different Department of Transportation designation. So we finally decided about a year and a half ago, this was the time that we were going to get all those initials. So we have them all now, and DEI has all been eliminated. So we don't know what's going to happen. What is the trickle down from that? We don't have any work. because of those initials right now, we have some relationships that we've started and we've talked about. We had one project ever that was specifically because we had our WBE. So I don't know how that's going to affect us. I feel really good that we have these relationships and the people that work with us and know us, they come back and they trust us and they recommend us. And that's really what it's about. Um, and we can work together to do projects and raise each other up.
So I love our conversation. And so as we wrap up today, I just wanted to know, what do you think women need to know in our profession that no one is talking about, but we should be?
Menopause, no. Everybody, all the women should be talking about that. I think flexibility. I networking and flexibility. And I think networking has this like, oh, I need to go get this mentor or this idea that it's sort of laid out. Like there's very specific ways to do that. And you can, but I think it's about showing up, you know, and being uncomfortable. Like show up and be uncomfortable, but find the things that resonate with you and find people and the places that resonate. And then those things start to happen naturally. And once those things start to happen, opportunities will happen. And I guess that's what I mean by flexibility. So it's not necessarily that you want to be a stay-at-home mom or that you want to work 4 hours a week or something, but those opportunities begin to happen when you show up. So I would encourage people to show up, whether it's a town hall meeting or the AIA or whatever it is that you think you might have a passion about. Be there.
Yeah, that is well-spoken words of wisdom. Show up, don't give up. So if people would like to stay in touch with you or network with you, how can they best connect?
Um, they can reach out by email that we have. Our website is envisage-arch.com. It's Kleiner at envisage-arch.com. And I would love to hear from people. But mostly they should just look at the AIA Cincinnati website and show up to some of the events and get to know not just me, but everyone else.
There we go. And anyone can sign up, no matter where you are in the world, you can sign up for the.
We have had people all over the country sign up for SFX, for the Small Firm Exchange, and come to those meetings. Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today and really sharing a lot of hard-won wisdom from your perspective of being both a woman in the profession of architecture and a small firm owner.
Thanks for having me, Angela. I appreciate it.